I had a complete breakdown 3 weeks before our wedding when my fiancé mentioned inviting my mother to stay with us afterward. He almost called everything off until he found my childhood diary and finally understood why I've been having nightmares all these years. James and I have been together for 3 years. He's everything I've ever wanted, parent and kind, funny, stable, and patient. Heck was with what he called my quirks around my family, particularly my mother. I've always kept our interactions with my family brief and controlled howly dinners at restaurants instead of homes. Short public meetups where everyone stays on their best behavior. James thought I was just private, maybe a little distant from them. What he didn't know was how I grew up. My mother has undiagnosed narcissistic personality disorder, and my childhood was a carefully curated performance for others while I lived in constant anxiety at home. Nothing was ever about me. My graduation became her networking event. My first art exhibition became her social triumph. Any achievement of mine was either claimed as her excellent parenting or dismissed if it didn't align with her interests. The wedding planning had been going smoothly because I hired a planner who served as a buffer between my mother and our decisions. But last Sunday, James casually mentioned that since his parents were staying with us for a few days after the honeymoon, maybe we should invite my mother too. To be fair, something in me broke. I couldn't breathe and speak. The thought of my mother in our home parent, our safe space parent, examining, judging, rearranging, and gradually taking control like she always did. I had a full-blown panic attack. I started hyperventilating, then sobbing uncontrollably. When I finally calmed down, he asked what was wrong, but I couldn't articulate decades of subtle emotional abuse in that moment. I just kept saying, she can't stay here. She can't stay here. He got frustrated. We'd been together 3 years. We're about to get married. And he realized he knew almost nothing about my relationship with my mother. He accused me of keeping secrets, of not trusting him. He said he couldn't marry someone who wouldn't let him in. He left to clear his head and told me to figure out what I wanted. I was devastated, convinced I'd ruined everything by not being normal enough, by carrying all this emotional baggage. That night, I pulled out boxes of childhood mementos, looking for photos, to remind myself there were good times too. Instead, I found my old journals, the ones I'd hidden under my mattress from ages 10 to 16. When James came back the next day, still distant and hurt, he found me surrounded by these notebooks, still crying. I was too exhausted to stop him. He read about the time I won a science competition at 12, and my mother told me it was cute that I thought being smart was a personality about when she threw away my favorite sweater because it was embarrassing her at a parent-teacher conference. About the constant gaslighting, parent, I never said that. You are too sensitive. Why do you always make everything about you? He read for hours, occasionally asking questions. Then he held me and apologized for not understanding sooner, for not asking the right questions, for assuming my distance from my family was a quirk rather than a survival strategy. We spent the next week talking more honestly than we ever had. I finally opened up about the nightmares I still have where I am trapped in my childhood home, about the anxiety that rises whenever my phone shows my mother's name. Yesterday, James called my mother himself. He told her politely but firmly that while she's welcome at our wedding, she won't be staying with us afterward. When she tried to argue, he simply said, "This isn't negotiable. We're setting boundaries that work for our marriage." For the first time in my life, someone stood between me and her manipulation. The wedding is still on, but now it truly feels like the beginning of something healing rather than another performance to survive.